Hello from London, and today I want to return to one of my favourite topics in language learning, which is reading. And a couple of years ago actually I made a video here on the channel where I argued that reading can have a really important role to play even if your main aim is to get good at speaking a foreign language. Today's message is that we'll all do better as readers in our target language if we understand that reading isn't actually one skill, it's 4 separate skills, and it's those that I'd like to pick apart in today's video. First of all, welcome if you're new here. I'm Dr. Gareth Popkins, and here we talk about language learning in all its forms from many angles. If you haven't yet subscribed for the vibe, please do, and you can get my free Language Learner Pro training videos by following the link underneath today's video. So yes, you'll make better progress as a reader if you realize that reading is not one skill, but 4. What are those skills? Well, first of all, there's the skill of skimming. That's reading for gist. When we skim a text, we're taking a top-down approach, scanning over or skimming over the whole of the text as quickly as possible to work out what it's about. Is it worth our closer attention? When we do that in our own language, we're bringing formidable skills to bear. First of all, our brains, as good readers, our brains seem to have the skill of sort of predictive text about them. We often only actually notice the initial and the end words in a word or even a group of words, and we can make sense out of them and read very, very quickly. And we bring to bear, of course, a lot of cultural knowledge about the nature of the text and the context as well to bear. So that's the first skill, skimming. The second is scanning. Again, that's a sort of top-down approach where we're looking though for specific information and the rest of the text is not really relevant. It might be, for example, that we're trying to find the time of a concert. We're looking through a program, for example. So that is scanning. Now, thirdly comes intensive reading. That's when we're trying to understand everything in the text in very, very close detail. It might be some important instructions about how to operate a piece of machinery. Or, for example, when we are reading a legal contract that we have to sign. With intensive reading, it tends to be a bottom-up approach where we're focusing in on each individual phrase and individual word even. And then finally, extensive reading, and this is really reading for pleasure, for example, a novel, where we want to get lost in the flow, the narrative, the atmosphere, and the characters. And the individual details might actually not be so important. Now, a good language course will expose us to all 4 types of reading skill and give us a chance to practice all 4. Just as a good language exam or test will actually put us on the spot and give us a chance to show our stuff in all 4 as well. But we as typical language learners, I think, tend to forget this variety and to revert to the way we behaved when we were kids learning to read in English, for example, for the first time. Regard all reading as intensive reading, trying to go over with our finger following each word, trying to understand each word and losing the big picture. And that's something I think that we need to avoid as language learners. I think we need to ask ourselves when we approach a text, how would I read this if I were reading it in my native language? Would I be wanting to extract particular types of information from it? Would I be skimming or scanning? Would I be doing actually intensive reading, yes? Or would it be an extensive reading experience? Ask ourselves that, and don't approach a text with the wrong expectations or beat ourselves up then if we're not able to do easy and get lost in the flow of extensive reading. When actually this is not a text we'd approach that way even in our own languages. What are some ideas then for getting practice in all 4 skills as language learners? Well, intensive reading is likely to be our experience when we're starting a language. You know, you're reading even short conversational dialogue transcripts, for example, in a textbook. When we don't know very much at the beginning, we are likely to be doing a lot of word for word trying to work out what's going on. But pretty soon we have a basic core vocabulary and some basic core structures, and it's more realistic to be doing other types of reading as well. So for scanning, we can find similar sort of texts to those that we might scan in English, whether they're timetables, a weather forecast on a website, or in a newspaper, for example. And we know that the way the information is conveyed tends to be similar across cultures. There might even be pictures to help us. And we can hope to extract key pieces of information. Now, when it comes to extensive reading, there things are a bit more difficult because, of course, we need a lot more vocabulary and a lot of structures to be able to do good extensive reading. And doing that with native level material is going to be pretty much a challenge, and it's going to turn into intensive reading if we're not careful, where we're going with a dictionary word after word. We might get pretty demotivated. So the answer, I think, there is to try and get graded material which is simplified in a careful way by specialists to be more appropriate for our level. And this sort of material is available in many languages, whether it's actually in your textbook, your course, or whether it's actually a separate set of short stories, for example, or simplified newspaper articles that you've actually found online or bought in hard copy. And with graded reading, we tend to need to understand an awful lot to be able to learn well from context. Up to 95% of the vocabulary we should be familiar with. Otherwise, actually, our attempts to guess can often actually simply be wrong, because we're not as good necessarily at guessing the meaning as we think we might be if we don't have enough context. So for extensive reading practice, it's great for motivation, it's great for acquiring language from the context if we can go for graded material that's at our level, even a bit easier than our level, or a bit above if you want to stretch ourselves and learn some more, but certainly even below our level for getting lost, for reinforcing, for having that feeling of being in the language, which is so beneficial to getting into its spirit, as well as, feeling pretty good. So those are some ways we can practice intensive reading, scanning, and extensive reading. But what, you might say, about skimming? Well, again, that's a difficult skill requiring a large vocabulary and a knowledge of all the structures in the language if you're going to do it with native level material. But things we can do before we get up to that upper intermediate level and beyond is maybe to go back over texts we've worked on intensively and our graded material that we've been reading extensively, and to try and skim it, and to see what we can pull out again from it that way. So those were different ideas on how to approach the 4 different reading skills. Remember then, don't be monolithic in your approach to reading, and do as much reading as you can if it's the sort of thing you enjoy doing in your native language. Try and transfer that enthusiasm to your learning of your foreign language too. That's what I'd say. Have you approached different types of reading so far in your language learning? Which ones are particularly challenging for you? Have you found great graded readers in your language that you'd recommend to me or to other learners? Well, let us know in the comments below. Thanks a lot for watching. As always, if you haven't yet already, don't forget to subscribe for the vibe, throw me a thumbs up, tickle that bell, and share the affair. See you next time.